Okay, I'd like to convene the meeting. This is the Polk City Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for September 17th, 2018. Over at the City Hall Council Chambers, we did have items 1 and 2 of the agenda taken care of, which was the call to order and the roll call. So we're moving on to item 3 of the agenda, which is approval of the current agenda. Could I have a motion to do that?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone that doesn't agree, say no. Item 4 is audience for any items that would like to be discussed that are not on the agenda. Tonight, we have 2 items on the agenda, one involving Lakeside Fellowship Church and the other one involving the rezoning of Wolf Creek Estates. Is anyone here to talk about an item other than those 2? Hearing none, we will go on to item 5 of the agenda, which is approval of the P&Z Commission meeting minutes for August 20th, 2018.
So moved. Second.
So have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving those minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. And anyone abstaining. Item 6 on the agenda is to consider a motion to recommend to council approval of an amended site plan for Lakeside Fellowship Church. Who is representing that?
Good evening, Karen Olive, Civil Design Spanish. My address is 3405 Southeast Crossroads Drive. So Jean Brad is here tonight on behalf of the owner of the property, the Lakeside Fellowship Church. We are here to ask for an amendment to the site plan that was previously approved. Basically, all we're doing is we are removing the gravel parking that was in this area and replacing it with paved parking, which would increase their parking by 63 stalls. The detention, which is currently constructed in the southern part of the property, was designed to handle all of the existing improvements as well as any future additions to the parking lot and building additions that could occur in the future. So there's no modifications to the detention. There's no utilities being proposed. The site is already mass graded, so really we're just kind of stripping off what's there and paving. Happy to answer any questions. All staff comments have been addressed.
Do you have anything to add, Kathleen?
No, they did address all the comments. The gravel that's on the south end, they're going to kind of use that in the existing gravel parking area to the west. There'll be a few trees that will be or a tree maybe?
Yeah, I think we need to add 1 tree through here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of trees on the site. They just, because of the paving requirements, they didn't need to add 1 tree. It's all shown in the address all comments.
Any questions or comments from the commission?
The detention was good for everything, even building addition.
Yeah, it was designed for that phase 2 building.
Mr. Chair, the only reason this is here is amended site plan is because they were first going to take a look at the lightly shaded area. But Edgewater has not gone ahead and materialized as was thought about when the site plan first came through. The heavily shaded area is more parking planned and makes more sense at this time. And there's still a deferment with the council on the lightly shaded areas.
And is that, the ticker on that deferment, does that start over again with the site plan, or is that ongoing?
That continues tomorrow at this time.
And any update on Edgewater?
No, sir.
Any other questions or comments?
I just had one comment. Aaron, thank you for taking care of all the comments.
Sure.
It's the prize. One of the very few that you have.
So if there is no further questions or comments, would entertain a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the amended site plan for Lakeside Fellowship Church, pending the recommendations in the memo from Snyder of September 13, 2018.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Sires.
Yes.
Dietz.
Yes.
Triplett.
Yes.
Olfest.
Abstain.
Hankins.
Yes.
Bowersox.
Abstain.
Thank
Yes.
you. Aaron, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. Item 7 on the agenda is Wolf Creek Estates. Since we have a lot of people here, and I'm assuming that we'll be wanting some audience comments on this, I just wanted to step through our normal protocol and participation as far as we handle issues of this nature. You kind of got an abbreviated version with what we just looked at. We normally start addressing an agenda item by having a presentation by the applicant, and then that is followed by follow-up comments from the city engineer representative, who has done some review comments for the applicant's items that have been turned in. Then at that point in time, we'll ask if there's any audience members who would like to have any comments and desire to speak. Just out of curiosity, if I could have a raise of hands, how many folks are wanting to speak tonight? So I have quite a few. Just wanted to go through the audience participation section. We'll want to have anyone who speaks start by stating their name and address. That is so we can have that correctly recorded in the minutes. Would like to have you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less if possible. If you are here and representing not only your own household, but other households who have asked you to speak on their behalf, if you could maybe point to them and let us know that you're not only speaking on behalf of yourself, but on behalf of these other individuals. And also, if you're running into some time limits in doing so, we'll grant you a little bit of extra time since you're representing more households than your own. Also would encourage you to be complete in your comments, as we do not want to go around and circle back to people that have already spoken later in the open hearing. During these comments, I would ask the city engineer representative to listen closely to the comments. Since a lot of times what's being applied for hasn't been well publicized, it was on the website for the city, but if I could have her just kind of listen in just in case anything was commented on that was factually incorrect, would like to get that cleared up individually. Then after we have closed off the audience participation, I'll turn it back over to the applicant to kind of address that, to see if they have any comments on the audience participation. So I'd ask you folks to kind of take notes if you could during the comments from the audience, so that that can all be handled in one follow-up session at the end. Then at that point in time, we'll turn it over to the commission here to have them ask any questions or make any comments that they have about this agenda item. So kind of with that being the plan, I would like to go ahead and kick things off with the presentation from the applicant for Wolf Creek Estates. And please state your name and address.
Thank you. Good evening, my name is Barton Turk, and I'm with Civil Engineering Consultants, 2486th Street in Des Moines. I'm representing 4-Star Development, Land Development. 4-Star Land Development would like to develop a 27-acre residential property located on the northeast portion of town. This property is bounded by 3rd Street to the west, Dorfrank Acres to the south, and undeveloped ground to the north, except for the Big Creek Technology Park, which is just north of this. Currently, this property is zoned C2. It's got some R3 in it. It's got some R2 in it, and R2 down here, and then a little bit of R1 down in here. We would like to propose a PUD development, a planned unit development, in that it doesn't quite fit the mold of an R2 or an R3 zoning. It has just a few different standards than what a typical zoning is. So what we're proposing to develop is single-family residential lots. It'd be 85 single-family residential lots and 47 townhome lots along the north here. And what we're trying to do is to provide some kind of a logical transition from the M1 zoning of the technology park and over here across the street to the R1 single family down in here. And we think this is a logical manner in the transition. Essentially, we are proposing a 3.2 acre park due to the density of the development. This park is essentially along 3rd Street here. It would include the extension of Wolf Creek Drive through the development, then also another street off from that, and then a few north-south connector streets. That's basically the project in a nutshell. We could go into it a lot further in terms of utilities and things, but I think the neighbors are here to discuss other matters. One of the things that we are doing here is we are proposing a buffer, since these lots are quite a bit different in size than the lots we are proposing. There has been a trend in this type of development throughout the metro area. There's currently developments occurring in Ankeny and Clive and West Des Moines, creating a high-density type development residential. One reason being is a lot of younger up-and-coming families are not able to afford some of these larger lots that are available. So these lots would be more affordable for people that can't afford a $300,000, $400,000 home. These would be more of a starter home. They would be basically ranch-style homes. They won't be modular. They will be stick-built. Most of them will have 2-car garages. Some of them will have 3-car garages. They will range basically as a footprint of 1,300 square feet. The townhome units will essentially be the same. They are on a 40 by 110 foot lot, and they're attached with another dwelling. So these are all by attached dwellings here in the townhome development. The single family development are essentially of lots of various widths from 55 feet to 60 feet with a depth of 110 feet. So basically, we are asking for approval to rezone this property from what it is currently R2, R3, and C2, and R1 to a PUD type development. Tonight with me, I have Mark Balkenstead with 4-Star Land Development, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have here down further in the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Could you just slide that up here so those of us back here can actually see it? Can you pass this whole?
Sure.
We can't see anything that you're showing right now.
That's because the lots are too small.
Thank you.
Sure.
So Kathleen, would you like to talk about your review comments?
Sure. First of all, the applicant by August 30th did provide the significant, or the 50% consent, so they did meet the requirements for this to be considered a petition. They have to get 50% consent from the owners within the 250-foot buffer. That's based on the size of the lots. So they did achieve that, so it is a official petition that can be considered by P&Z and council. Comment number one was just that it had a higher higher density, obviously, than what even your R1A or your R2, and your smaller lots would handle, and certainly much higher density than what you have in an R1 district, although the property as it sits now is not all R1. It is a combination of well, as you can see on that memo, it's C2, R3, which is apartment type. There is some R2 currently zoned there, which would allow for duplexes, and then there is a small section of R1 at the south, along the southeast portion of the property. But we had kind of, we met with the developer at a pre-application meeting, and they suggested that they look pretty closely at the park, given the size of the lots, that perhaps they could enhance the park or do something with that park. The parkland dedication for these number of lots is 2.71 acres. However, that should subtract out the detention basin and the area that's underwater during the 100-year flood in that drainage ditch. So even though the park that they're showing is 3.2 acres, I'm not sure how much of that is usable in terms of, so I'm not sure if they're actually meeting the parkland dedication, just the minimum requirements of the parkland dedication, let alone anything beyond that. And we've kind of suggested maybe some amenities to enhance that, and that's not, we didn't see any of that either. So that's a little bit undefined in terms of the park.
Are you not having, or do you not know the level of the detention basin, so can't do that calculation at this point?
Yeah, usually they'll kind of guesstimate, and give us an approximate, and then we'll look at it closer when we get to the construction drawing stage, because they haven't done all the hydraulics. But at this point, we don't even have an estimate of how much of it is outside any water surface at the 100-year flood event stage. Then there is an outlot on the north side of the street. As you see, there'll be a culvert coming in. The street will line up with Wolf Creek Drive, which is, what the city, per the comprehensive plan and policies, you want to see those street continuity and the square intersections. So that part is good in terms of where they're lining it up. And then there is a culvert there, but on the north side, there's an outlot of about 0.35 acres, and they're indicating that would go to the city. I guess I'm questioning if the city would really want that or what they would do with that, and it might make more sense to have that be part of the townhome project. They could put some kind of sign or something there. I mean, that's not my call. I'm just asking the question on what the city would do with that, because the park is on the south side, so it's not contiguous without crossing a street that would be fairly heavily traveled. So again, I'm not sure that particularly makes sense. We had talked to the developer about concerns about having 132 dwelling units with only one method of ingress egress. We had talked about, there is an existing right-of-way that's not been vacated, even though the street is not developed, and that's 6th Street coming from Frank Acres to the south. It's paved at Madison, but then once you get north of Madison, there's one lot depth there that it's appears to be a private driveway, but it actually is a public right-of-way still owned by the city. And we had suggested that street connection be made, or minimum, at least some kind of emergency access. But in looking at the comprehensive plan, I mean, your comprehensive plan is pretty clear that having the grid connectivity between neighborhoods is important, and so we're recommending that rather than that it be actually a street connection, which might mean that the street would need to line up a little better. Right now, it would, if 6th Street continued, it doesn't quite match up. So we want to square up that intersection. Let's see, we just said we're not, at this stage of the game, we're not looking at whether there is any need for turning lanes or anything out there. We haven't done a traffic impact analysis. We'll kind of take a look and see if that needs to be done down the road, if and when this moves forward. We had asked the developer to provide some sample floor plans, and part of the reason was that we wanted to see how the buildings would fit on the lots with the garages and the smaller size homes, and that's particularly because you'll see a lot of rear yard drainage swales, and we're not sure how much usable yard space the homes will have once when you kind of subtract out that drainage ditch. So we kind of wanted to get and we hadn't seen that yet, so that's just more of a question, if they're gonna walk out the back door, if they're gonna have room for a patio. You wouldn't be able to put a patio within the easement area, with it being potentially a storm sewer easement, you wouldn't even be able to put a deck there. So I'm not sure exactly what accommodations they've got made and what the building footprint looks like. So that's just a question for the developer. And yeah, and that kind of covers number 6 and 7. And just kind of, in some of the cases, we're interested to see what the ponding might be. I don't know if those are designed with a lot of freeboard, or if in fact, for example, near lot 26, if you're really gonna have a 3-foot pond when you walk out your back door, because that kind of, the pond, you can see the contours on lots 25 and 26, for example, go right up to the building setback line. So again, trying to see how that functions. Let's see, storm sewer easement between lots 84 and 85, they're showing it as 10-foot wide, it needs to be 30-foot wide per code. So that just is that's a fairly minor detail, but I don't know what the impact is on their lots and the buildable area on those particular lots. And we did not get into the level of looking at utilities at this point in time. We can do that as it moves forward, and certainly at the time of preliminary plating, we will. The understanding is obviously that there will be sanitary sewers and water mains to provide hydrant coverage as required per code, and utilities would be designed per SUDAS, including some services to lots, assuming they have basements at this point in time, because we haven't seen the floor plans. I'm not sure if there are basements or not in the homes, and whether they would need some services. I just mentioned to note or show that there would be sidewalks on both sides of the street. As far as I can tell, they're not asking for any kind of a waiver there. I mean, it's not listed in any of their waiver requests, so my assumption is that they're gonna have sidewalks on all sides, but just a clarification on that. A little bit of clarification on what the buffer tree, they're showing a buffer along the south property line, what those trees might be and what the sizes, species, and when they would be planted. And, I don't know if there's any phasing on the project, but how that phasing might occur. Because your Polk's code does require buffer plantings to go in with the first phase of the project. So we're kind of trying to make sure that we're copacetic on when those trees would go in. Bulk regulations, that was just a clarification. I'm assuming what they're asking for is 6-foot side yard setback on both sides as opposed to just on one side, which would equate to a 3-foot setback. I want to make sure that in fact it really is 6 foot, or if it is a 3-foot setback, then we would need to make sure we're meeting all fire and building codes for that lesser setback. Also just wanted them to mention the bulk regulations. What we have to do is list the bulk regulations that they are proposing. Obviously, they're proposing smaller lots than normal, so you want to put the minimum lot size as one of the bulk regulations in terms of what they're proposing. I think I calculated it to be 5,500 square feet minimum, but I'm not compared to some of your other zoning districts, but I'm not 100. The 10,000 is your R1. Obviously, you do have some zoning districts that have smaller than that. So. But I just want to make sure we understand what that minimum lot size would be, both for the single family and for the townhomes. I guess in clarification too, I want to make sure that every developer understands that because it is a townhome project, it would require a site plan process. There was a development, I believe, Arrow Ridge, that did not have a site plan, and so the code was changed to make it clear that even if they're just by attached, since they're in a townhome regime, a site plan would need to be presented to P&Z for approval, and then council for approval before any building permits were issued, so that you could cover things like landscaping and that kind of thing at that point in time. And townhomes do, unless they're asking for a waiver at this point in time, they do require visitor parking stalls. So the townhomes along that, for those 47 lots would require 1 visitor stall per 5 units, I believe is what it is. Unless they're asking for a waiver on those parking. I can't tell from this if they're potentially, I mean, you may have some room for some on-street parking if they actually are, if they're doing joint driveways as opposed to individual driveways. If you wind up with individual driveways, there's not a lot of room for on-street parking. So that's kind of where that visitor parking requirement comes in. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, just a quick question. On your recommendations, item B, did you mean, what, it talks about one of the options is, not sending it forward, did that second, did the approval
Yeah, that
need
should
to
have been
be
deleted.
denied?
Yeah, I apologize, I think that was probably kind of paste thing.
Okay.
If you recommend denial of the rezoning, then that would include, there would be no reason to approve
Okay.
it. So, yeah, I apologize, anything after that comma should be deleted.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Thanks, Kathleen. At this point in time, would like to open it up to the audience for comments. I'd like the record to also show that we did indeed receive 3 comments by email. So if that could be reflected in the minutes, would appreciate that.
2 were actually by phone, and the one
Oh.
was typed up. That shorter one was over the phone.
Okay, thank you. And did everyone get a chance to read that or look at those prior to the meeting? Okay. Did want to clarify one thing regarding the audience comments tonight. As part of a zoning change, there are some required public hearings that do take place. This is not necessarily one of those required public hearings for rezoning. However, it's been the long-standing tradition of this commission that we want to encourage participation of residents and other concerned citizens to come and talk before our commission, because we need to hear from you folks in order for us to best serve the community. You're definitely one of the key groups that we're wanting to serve. So I just wanted to make sure that I said that the official public hearings are actually handled at the council level, and that would be a later stage should this move forward. So there's other hearings to come as in addition to this public comment period. Would like to, I guess, have that show of hands again to see who all would like to address the commission this evening. And so I see a group of 4 over there. So why don't we kind of start with that and kind of go down the line. And once again, you could start with your name and address and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And then once we get that little group done, then we will, I'll do a show of hands once again.
I'm not with this little group.
Depends on what he
I
says,
don't
we
think-
might or might not claim that.
I'm not a trained public speaker in order, so this is just gonna be off the top of my head. But what I've got here.
And
is
could you
listed by-
start with your name and address, please? Yeah.
Doug Larson, 401 East Madison Drive.
Thanks, Doug.
He's representing North Frank Acres.
What I've got is 10 or 12 items that the majority of door Frank acres seem to agree on. We haven't had a meeting or anything, that's just door to door. But there's, Snyder Engineering had a steering committee, stakeholder meetings a year and a half ago.
That's the comprehensive plan?
Yes, of the city's comprehensive plan. There were, I'm gonna take a guess, maximum of 175 people involved from all the different neighborhoods around town. As near as I can tell from the rest of my fellow citizens, there is one thing about this project that meets anyone's requirement. Our man here at the engineering made the comment about comparing what's going on in West Des Moines, Urbandale, Johnson, towards this side of the home. This is Polk City. We don't want to be any part of this stuff.
Exactly.
This is not
a.
another Waukee. or
They want that, they can
another-
do that. Yeah.
That's why we're here. When you start putting in 50-foot lots on these homes, and I'm gonna sound a little contentious and derogatory here, but it looks like a planned trailer park.
Amen. Yes.
So if we could have the gentlemen have the floor and be able to speak, would appreciate that. Please show some respect.
This is a far drive from the R1 that's zoned out behind us now. And nobody wants anything that goes along that this represents. These gentlemen would have to go a long ways to show me what they're gonna build in there, to prove that it's not gonna be low-income housing. It's cookie cutter stamped right down the line for a quarter, pushing a third of a mile. I drove around a lot of Ankeny today, and I can't find anything that looks like this. I would be happy to go look at it if someone could prove where it's at.
Northwest 43rd and Riverdale.
You have that many of these units over there?
They're doing this exact project. Exactly.
That's not Polk City.
I want to look like a city.
So,
I'm trying to tell you, sir, Northwest 43rd.
Mark, if we could have you reserve your questions after the end, would appreciate
You
that.
said you'll have time at the end. On it.
One item. Show us the price of model. You know, prove what this thing is gonna look like. Give me a comparison. Traffic from 132 homes. Entrance and exits, turn lanes, who's gonna pay for it? I'm thinking about what's going on up by Casey's. You're gonna have to put in turn lanes there later on. We will, at our expense. The biggest one is water runoff. There's no retention ponds on that thing. That's a big hill, it all comes down to us now. You put that much concrete and roofing in there, and nobody's gonna tolerate that kind of runoff. What they had up in what Kimberly, the disaster Kimberly had, I don't wanna see that.
I don't either.
The plot map, this thing that's here, these people have been passing them around here tonight. Why didn't we all get a copy of that to begin with? All of your Frank,
One side.
one side of the street is North Frank County, the other side didn't, none of Wolf Creek County. What you're reading up there, the notes that you've been given on this thing, I'd like to have a copy of them too. What's this gonna do to my taxes in the long run?
And the value of our homes.
And the value of our homes. Back to the park for a minute. Currently, that's a gravel pit and a swamp. Who's gonna pay for bringing that up to standard? That's a playground. Tree City in the USA, aren't that what we've been designated as? I've never seen a developer in this town yet who didn't bulldoze anything that looked like a tree. If it's a tree, turn it into concrete. Get rid of it. Don't want to see that. Bike paths, you mentioned sidewalks. Are we gonna get a bike path out there? Homeowners Association, this is for clarification only. Is this part of the Wolf Creek estate now, or is it separate? We're gonna have same or different homeowners? I don't know what else I got. Traffic and water. The traffic issue, there's a cart and a horse that here going on. This street you're talking about, Northwest 6. I don't know that that can be made into a through street. I've heard that because of the way it's graded and everything, you have to redo it, you have to completely rebuild that. Not surface it, rebuild it. The next adjacent north-south street would be another block of east behind the homes or on the east side of Northwest 6 to connect that. I don't think these homes, any of them should be built until there's another entrance and an exit. Pretty well covered mine.
Okay, thank you very much. And, just to clarify, I heard several folks say that they're from your development, so I let you go well over the 3 minutes, but I appreciate that. So yeah, next in line, please.
Amber Cutter, East Southside Drive. First of all, I just want to start by saying, I hope you guys as council hear our voices. I've been at meetings before where the people's voice isn't heard and being pursued. So I hope you truly are here listening to what we as the people have to say. I'm an educator, and so I look through this through a lens of children. My daughter's in TK, and she barely made it to the program. So how are we gonna survive Polk City if we can't even staff our schools? We can't even provide programs that are for our students. There's not enough space in Polk City to provide for our children.
Thank you.
Okay, Lauren Piggott, my husband Chris, 421 East Southside Drive. Sir, I heard you say we're building these homes because not everyone can afford a $300,000 and $400,000 home. And I hear you. When we got married, we lived in a townhome in Waukee, and we didn't want to be there. We didn't want our kids in schools that were overcrowded. But we worked hard, and we saved our money to come live in Polk City. That's why people are here, because they worked hard to be here to provide their children with a small school. We are not an Ankeny or a Grimes or a Johnston. Our schools cannot hold what they have now. When we moved last year, we had to take our daughter out to Central because West was full, and Central was great, but how are you gonna put all these kids, where are you gonna put them? Exactly. Because I can tell you right
What do
now,
your taxes go to now?
I can tell you right now,
Nothing
not
like that.
only as a resident, but as a business owner, there are not enough business in this town that the schools are getting commercial tax from. So unless we bring more businesses to this town, our taxes are gonna go up regardless. So now our taxes are gonna go up twice to fund this and help our schools. I see Dr. Mark here, and I'm sure he has the same fear. He's looking out for our kids, but it's not a one-man job. I got your back, Dr. Mark. You too.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Just reiterate, this proposed development will add a couple hundred kids potentially to the school district. And, you know, West Elementary is already on capacity, and where are these kids gonna go? So that is something that definitely needs to be taken into consideration.
My name is Ashley Delaney. I live at 909 12 Oaks Court. I too am an educator. I'm a teacher by trade. I'm a professor at Iowa State University. And I actually study school finance and STEM education. So my main concern was actually touched on briefly by them, which is this is currently zoned partially and can be used commercially, which provides an opening to that area. I personally have contacted Nat Property twice, trying to get information about purchasing part of this land for something completely different and have not had a phone call returned. So I know this land has been for sale for an extended period of time, but even when I stopped in to the offices that are in the technology area, they told me that they could talk about their lots, but could not talk about the Nat Property lots. So I don't know how far this project has come along, but they're definitely, and I have another colleague, I won't speak for her, who also has not had phone calls returned, so.
Okay, thank you. So I think we had everybody that had raised their hand down there that I could see initially. When I saw that grouping, I didn't really look over much further, so I could have a show of hands for other folks that would like to speak. So, maybe start with the gentleman in the blue shirt.
Sir, I don't know if this fits in this audience, I apologize if it doesn't.
Pardon?
Tim Redding, 825 West Rice. Sorry. We, in Wolf Creek, as you've noticed, already have a lot of people walking down that main road to get into town. If you add 600 more people out there, is the city, if this fits in your reality, gonna put a sidewalk down there to keep them off the road? 600 more people? Just a thought.
Okay, thank you, Tim. And ma'am, that was in the front row, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah. Some of mine are similar to what Doug had, but the traffic problem already, I'm sorry, Marlene Yude, 505 East Madison. There's a traffic problem already on 3rd Street when you leave town. If you ever go to that little strip center up there of businesses, which I do, I have supported those. If I go in there at night, like at 5:30 or so, to get my hair cut and try to back out onto 3rd Street to go home to Madison, it's impossible to get out because of the traffic, even at that hour of the night. If you go into the post office on the opposite side of the road, it doesn't matter what time of day or night, unless you're going way after dark, then there's no traffic hardly. But if you're going in there on a Saturday and you don't notice that there's a game, or if you're trying to get in there a Friday night and there's a game over at the high school, or if some game or something has let out names and they're coming home, trying to get in and out of that post office or that strip area of shopping places is impossible. You can't back out without getting honked out, people are very rude, and they just don't wanna give you time to get out, even though you have to take a chance and hope you can make it out in time, and you have to back out of there, which is not an easy task either. There's not ample room to turn around, so the traffic is already a problem on Third Street, adding 200 to 300 or more drivers out in that area seems like a potential traffic hazard to me, and just ruining any business that is on that street already, as far as entrance and exits, because people are not gonna put up with that. Then, you take the morning commute, the night commute, you get out by Casey's, and you try to go across Bridge Road to get to 141. And I'm sitting in the mornings, anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour on the bridge, trying to make it to the stop sign, so I can get to 141. Coming home at night, if I'm lucky, I can get to Parker and try to dodge that traffic to get down to Broadway. Or go on down and sit at Fairway forever, which Fairway is losing business because now we no longer stop at Fairway because you can't get back out on the road either direction, whether you're on Bridge Road or you're on Third Street. It's almost impossible to get out if you're wanting to go north. So traffic's impossible coming and going from Polk City just to get to 141, and you're gonna put more people out to get to West Des Moines or some other suburb where they're working across that mile-long bridge, which is also outdated, old, and it's gonna have to be repaired, face it. It's been there since the 70s, it's gonna need a facelift or rebuilt. It needs to be wider, and it's gonna take on more traffic with more volume sitting on that bridge, adding weight that had never been planned on when that thing was built. So you've got a problem out there too. Then the water runoff that he's talking about currently soaks into that field area out there. Those of us I know up on the north end get plenty of it as it is, coming off of that field, it comes down across our yards. That is now going to be concrete out there, causing more of it to run off. And if somebody builds a pond out there or a retainment out there to hold water in, who's gonna treat it and maintain it for mosquitoes? Who's going to make sure it doesn't erode and cave in land? Is it gonna be rock wrap to prevent the erosion? Because like over on Waconsa, where the city used a ravine over there for runoff drainage, the homeowners are now responsible for maintaining their backyards by having to fill in or do something to that area to prevent their homes from sliding into it eventually. Are these homes that they're putting out there gonna be so close to something like that that you now expect low-income people to go out and address land that's eroding because of water, because there's a lot of water out there?
Okay, well, thank you. Two rows back.
My name's Mary Ness. I'm a Wolf Creek Division, and I moved here 2 years ago. The reason I moved here is because of the recreation, the trees, the lakes. It's beautiful. I watched what happened by Casey's, and I thought that was criminal.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought it was just atrocious. And it makes me sad. It takes years and years to grow trees. The density of the houses there, they're just gonna bulldoze. They're just gonna cut all those trees down. He doesn't care, he doesn't live here. He's here to make money, but he doesn't care about the environment. That's all I have to say.
Sir, you're the one sitting over here laughing.
And the gentleman in the red shirt, please.
I mean, that's a pretty bold statement itself.
So the gentleman in the red shirt, please, has the floor.
Jim Frank, 204 East Madison Drive. A lot of people don't realize that Door Frank Acres used to be a gravel pit. Literally, we can get playground sand in my backyard, take it down about 2 feet. My sump pump normally runs 9 to 10 months a year. And I bet you a lot of people's running more than that. When Dorothy and Frank went created that development, they were proud enough of it to put their name on it. And that just goes to distinguish what the houses look like. Sure, they're all 1,200 square foot cracker boxes, but the turnover on that neighborhood, I would imagine would be 15 years would be the average. And you know that's not gonna happen to these homes in Deerfield. It's gonna have a hard turnover, just like an apartment. There's a lot of trees that are in the backyards of those homes that have got the development. Just like over to Casey's, there's no reason to take them all down. When I moved here about 30 years ago, the city was going to put a sidewalk in to connect Dorfrank and Wolf Creek. Instead, we were able to get the sidewalk that goes to Casey's right now. That's about 2 foot wide. Oftentimes, when you see these development comes in, they put in trees that are non-native to Iowa. They don't take care for them and they die shortly thereafter. It'd be nice to see a plan on using native trees. There's been no mention of whether floor plans, whether they're all the same, whether they flip, the color of the homes. Is it all gonna look like a big cookie cutter? Is it something that Polk City would be proud of? I just don't think so at this time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Gentleman in the kitchen.
The letters you sent out, did go to a piece of people from the neighborhood. My name is John Amstel, I'm on 508 North 6th Street.
Thank you.
Which I didn't get a letter, but you're talking about going straight through North 6th, straight to the development. I just wanna know how you decided that, and maybe we should rethink who got letters and resend it out again, and have another opportunity, because I'm sure another 50, 70, maybe 100 people will show up, something like this, if you let everybody know that, how it's gonna affect them. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, gentleman in the white.
Name is Corey Hetland, 605 North 3rd Street. I'm right on the highway, kind of at the bottom of this whole development. So on 1st of July, last part of June, we actually had water come over the highway, because part of that, I believe, is because of the development of the technology park. I don't remember water coming over the driveway there. There used to be a slough clear up on the north end of that property that used to sit there and retain some of the water, but when they developed it, much of that slough went away. That whole plot of land sits on a pretty good grade. I don't know, you tell me how big the grade is. The top fence clear in the east end is quite a bit higher than the lower part. You develop this and put all this concrete down and houses, how much water is gonna come down and flood either the highway going across or go between the lots 1 and 2 down at the bottom of that hill and cause more water problems for us that are existing at the bottom of that hill. The other thing I think is traffic is a big issue. Some of us do have kids on this end of town, and a lot of us chose to live down here because it was kind of sparsely populated. This is kind of just the opposite of the reason a lot of us chose to live in this neighborhood. What they're proposing to put in there directly defies a lot of our reasoning for moving there and living here in the first place. The sidewalk, I guess. I mean, I have 2 little kids, and you can't get to the park without walking up and down real steep ditches, or else walking on the busy highway and trying to avoid trucks. So I think that's all I really got. The large trees. So my corner has a few 200 to 300-year-old oak trees left that are surviving from whenever they bulldozed in the 70s. And one of the reasons we chose to live there is because of those 200-300-year-old oak trees, the old growth trees that are left in the corner of the property. I'd hate to see them go, but I guess that's my own personal opinion.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Anyone else?
My name's Jim Reed, I live on Drive. And talking about what he said on that plat about
changing this to POD. Our lot sizes are anywhere from 110 to 300 feet deep. We put 8 of those houses on our lot. That's how small this is. And you gotta realize that I've been in the construction business all my life, right, 35 years. I build houses, I buy lots, I've been a developer, I've seen it all. But my thing is what I think the people are saying is, we're not Ankeny, we're not Urbandale, we wanna be Polk City. We don't want all this, you know, low income housing. I mean, that's why you have apartments, that's the way I look at it. I mean, you know, these little cookie cutter houses, I agree with what he said, you're gonna have people coming in and out of there. They're gonna live there, and the taxes come due, they can't afford it, they go wrong. I build houses, that's how they, that's even at $300,000 houses. They have a 2-year tax abatement, 4-year tax abatement, they live there, when the taxes kick in, they sell their house. Trust me, I sold houses to people that could barely afford the house, but as soon as the tax kicked in, I did it because it's just for the money. And that's the way I did it, and when taxes kicked in, them houses were for sale. Did I care? Not really. I mean, my money, and this is what they're doing. That's how I feel. And to me, that's why I was telling them one more thing. Our lots are 110 to 300 feet. A 55 lot by 100-foot lot is not a buffer behind any of our houses. That's, to me, just cruel. I mean, I've done developments where I've had to buffer houses in, and it's never been a dramatic drop like that.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone else like to speak tonight? Yes, sir.
Brian Parrish, 1625 Glendale. Just hearing a lot of the comments tonight. This is my first time on one of these, and I'm relatively new in town. I've been here 3 years. I live over in the Woodhaven neighborhood, and I just find it interesting that we're gonna pack so much here. And I live in a neighborhood that's literally named about saving trees. And I've tried, and I still watch everything go mulched around me. It's just like what we see about Casey's, where I'm watching 150-year-old oak trees turn into a pile of mulch. So I want to make a point that we can expect not just that, but we're going to see a lot more than that. It's going to be grading, it's going to be soil disturbance, it's going to affect hydrology. It's going to mess a lot of stuff up. I just want to, close your eyes, just imagine about where something this dense lives. It's a place along Interstate 80, it's along 35. It's absolutely in Ankeny, it's absolutely in Urbandale, it's absolutely in Waukee, because it exists right next to the interstate. It exists in a place that's able to support a bunch of people in a concentrated place with easy egress and access. It doesn't belong on the north end of town where you gotta crawl through town through an older developed place to get to where you need to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I just hope, listen to these comments.
Could you say?
I'm sorry, really local on Madison. You look at tentative, I don't know if you are or not, but I'm saying person except these two gentlemen, or maybe that front row, they're in favor of this. I hope you listen to this. Well, every person that spoke tonight is against this thing, for one reason or another, many of them, like I said, there's hope you listen.
Anyone else? Okay, I appreciate everyone's input. Thank you very much. Did want to maybe just go to staff real quick and have them talk about who got copies and who didn't get copies, and also where these are always, and where copies are always available.
I'll take each of the first.
Yeah.
Copies are always available on the website. Anytime there's a situation like this that's coming out. Okay, I'll stand up. It's always available on the website. Anytime there's a public meeting like this or a public hearing, the information is going to be on the website. Several ways you can get to it. You can go to the meeting date, poke into stuff, or it's under meetings, notices, that type of thing.
Essentially our full packet.
Yes, everything's on there. Number two, this is not a public hearing. This is a hearing to get your input to the P and Z before it goes to council. Council is where the public hearing will be held. Our code says anybody within 250 feet, a property within 250 feet of the proposed rezoning will get a letter. That's probably why some of you on the north side of Madison got letters and the south side did not, because we've already exceeded the 250 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Doug Larson.
Yes.
We get on the list of the things that he's talking about, if we're gonna have another mailing, that 250-foot thing that he's talking about.
So, by our city ordinance, it's sent out to people within 250 feet. With you knowing that this is going to be an active item, I would encourage you to be following, planning and zoning and council meetings, agendas on the website, to see if anything is coming along. Also, keep in contact with your neighbors that are within 250 feet. But I think probably the easiest way is to be following, be an active citizen and be looking at the agendas for the planning and zoning and for the council meetings. And actually, I'd always encourage citizens to do that. So, yeah, at this point in time, we'd like to turn it over to the commissioner for tonight and kind of talk about.
Mark Hawkinstead, 1003 Northwest Ridge Road, Ankeny. And I did want to say a few things about the comments that were brought up. The oak trees that are in the park area, that's why that park is there. Because I do plan and want to save all those mature oaks. So that's why we did the 2.2 acres out front, to save those. As far as
How many acres are gonna go away?
Excuse me?
How many acres of trees are you gonna take down?
About 7 point.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
most of them are gonna go away.
Yep.
And,
How about the
you
common
know,
ones behind my house?
and when you guys built,
mature
we
common.
probably took down trees for your house, so. The other part of it is when they talk about water runoff, I've had engineering done by Alan Grabutsky. The development's actually going to help the hydraulics in that area with the storm, and the drainage that's going to be put in is actually going to help that area with the water that you have now.
So has this already been approved? Like, is it it's gonna happen? That's what it sounds like.
No.
Nothing's been
I'm telling
approved.
you that I did a soil boring, soil samples, had the experts come out, and they said that this would actually help the water table in that area because it's higher. Just let me finish, please. Let me finish.
So we've had some audience participation. The next phase is to let the applicant talk about some of the comments that we've
I
heard.
understand that lot size is different, that's why we're trying to buffer between the large acreage lots that are there.
Evergreen trees is not a buffer, sorry.
Sir, please.
So that we can either do that or put a fence in. I don't like fences, I think trees are much better buffer than fences are. So, and the zoning that's there today actually allows for higher density than what we're asking for. It's C3, or R3 and R2. We could put apartments on that property. If that's what, if you think the zoning that's there now, we put 300 units on it. We're actually going down in density than what is there. So, it's already zoned. The zoning's there.
Just in clarification, if you look at your memo, you'll see that it's a variety of zoning. It's not all zoned R3. There's some C2, there's a small section of R3, there's R2 that again allows to do single family or duplexes, and some R1. So I never calculated how many acres of each and what the density would be, but it's a mixture of zoning that's there today.
If I may, why don't you explain what is available, what C2, D, and the various are? Can you tell us what those allow? What
And I apologize, I didn't bring my book. The C2 is commercial, though. I mean, to give you an example, C2 is what you see on the north side of Ridge Road. So you've got Luana Bank, you've got Casey's, you've got, convenience stores. That could happen at the kind of the northwest corner of the property. So I mean, it's one of your more intense commercial areas. Then just to the east of that, not touching, there is a kind of a buffer strip there of R2 ground that's between the commercial and Door Frank. That would allow duplexes, so you could have.
R2 is duplex.
Yes, yeah, so you could have duplexes on those lots backing up there. About, I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4 lots or so into Door Frank Acres. And then to the north of that, which is south of where City Laundry is, that's R3. There is a section there that could be apartments.
That would be apartments.
Yeah, and that would be a lot that's about the size of the City Laundry site. Can't tell you exactly how many acres, but roughly that size of lot. So I'd say about 400 feet-ish wide. So about 400 by 400, but I don't quote me on those numbers, but that's a ballpark thing. And then from there to the east, the majority of it is R2, which would allow duplexes. And then there is a strip of R1, which would allow your 10,000 square foot lots that abut abuts Door Frank Acres on the, I'd say east 2/3 or so.
What I was trying to get is, so the audience knows what a C2, R3, and R2, and R1 allow.
Right, that's just kind of broad brush.
Can I make one more comment? Is I have lived in Polk City for many years. I developed the property Pine Ridge Estates and have developed and lived in Polk City for quite some time.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Why don't you just build this in Ankeny, one of those cornfields on the north side of all the other developments?
Yeah, sure.
You know,
I guess-
why here?
Well, why
There's
here?
no need.
Why-
I guess,
So, we are past the audience participation. And so we are moving on. The next part of the meeting is actually for the commission to ask questions and to make comments. So I'm assuming we're going to start with a lot of questions that folks might have. Anyone like to start?
All right. Well, first of all, I think everybody knows somebody had 5 or 6 comments last time, and I was for the project, but I voted no because it had so many comments. We talked about this a long time, and our staff is very accommodating to developers, as well as the residents. But 16 comments, Kathleen, you corrected me last time, I think it was for every comment there. Are any of these comments, these are things that all need to be taken care of before
Well, or at
really
least-
give serious consideration to
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are not, because it's a PUD, there's a lot of flexibility there. In other words, the developer can propose what he wants to propose, and the codes then can be adjusted with the PUD. So it's a little bit different in that I can't say you can't do this, because they can ask you for the PUD, for special conditions that related to PUD that would allow it.
But they need to ask you for it, so
Yeah,
we can look at it, right?
right.
And they haven't totally done that.
Yeah, I mean,
And we
and-
haven't had plans and elevations.
Yeah, we received-
Other developers come in and give us.
Yeah, we
So
received-
nobody's had an advantage of really seeing what's going on here.
Right.
And yet it's been presented to us, so.
Yep.
I mean, I personally don't see how we can vote on it unless everybody just wants to vote it down.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few questions that.
Yeah. Okay.
Can people introduce themselves for those of us who don't know people's names, just so we know who our representatives are?
Sure.
Like before they speak like we did, so that we know who you all are.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't see.
And we have name tags up there as well.
Oh, I can't see back there, I'm sorry. Don't mind me, just got my first pair of readers the other day.
Join the crowd. Yeah, join the crowd.
You want me to start? My name's Doug Siders. I've lived in Polk City for 11 years. I'm a licensed architect with over 50 years experience.
Justin Vogel, live in Pine Ridge Estates, engineer by trade, been here 8 years.
Krista Bowersox, I've lived in Polk City over 50 years. So I guess it's just longevity difference.
I'm Ron Hankins, been in Polk City for coming up on 15 years in January. Been great living here. I'm a retiree from Mid-America Energy Company. I am serving as the chairman of the commission this year. We actually rotate that job, so it's not necessarily an honor to be the chairman. but oh well.
And I'm Doug Oldcrest. I'm the newbie here in Polk City. We moved here 3 years ago to be near our grandkids. I worked in construction for 42 years up in Northwest Iowa and volunteered to be on the board because I have dealt with some of these kind of issues in the past. So it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm Deanna Triplett, and I've lived in Polk City for 12 years.
Dennis Deeds, been here 20 years. In fact, we were one of the first ones in that Pine Ridge development over there with Casey's. I'm retired. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none.
Also, it's worth mentioning the Planning and Zoning Commission is a volunteer commission, and also we are appointed. So we are appointed to terms by the mayor, and he does, as he wishes, does consultations with others for those appointments as well.
Thank you.
So back to commission comments and questions. Anyone else?
I got a question. This project, is that to be like a villa project where, you know, like some of the villas where like you have your individual residence, but the outside and the lawns are all taken care of through an association? They're gonna be individually owned, or what?
It was misquoted, it will not be a townhome. Those are
It will not be
homes,
an
individually
association.
owned,
Okay.
individually maintained.
All right. The current, and that what's the thing about that 6th Street? That is city property that can be developed into a street.
It would require
Could
reconstruction.
Sure, I mean, but when you look at the, you know, actual photograph here, it looks like kind of a driveway for somebody, so it would actually, that street would become a street, and that person would just have a driveway off that street. Is that how we're doing? Okay. I guess when I look at the current zoning and the current layout, it looks to me, and I really looked over this packet when we got it, but I kind of like what is there now in terms of transitioning from our industrial area back into the other residential areas there, and I like having that commercial site there because we need something in that part of town that could maybe be used commercially for the neighbors in that neighborhood. So I like what's there now.
Yeah, I guess I have kind of a laundry list of comments and questions, some of which have been answered, but, kind of jumping on the prior comments here, I too like the zoning as it is now. This was something that we talked about, I think, pretty significantly when we were talking about the comprehensive plan as well. The areas that we looked at, I think the most in those conversations were areas that were undeveloped land that was abutting where current residents live, and that's where we kind of focused the most of our attention. In particular, what I like about the current zoning is the R1 zoning, the small strip of it that abuts the current residents through the majority of that line segment. Close to the road is some R2, but most of that segment is R1. That's similar to what we did in the area just north of the church on Bridge Road as well, Lakeside Fellowship. That development hasn't gone in yet, but the lots just to the west of the Edgewater development, we kept at the same density as R1, and then did the density change actually within the development at the first street, and had it be a little bit more dense and stair-stepped from there. So I guess the part of this that bothers me the most is the density of the first line of homes on the south end. I am open to more dense areas in our community at some point in time. I think there's right places and wrong places for it. Having it near industrial zoning is not a bad spot for it. Also on the north side of this zoning, industrial zoning, which is not in Polk City currently, but could be annexed, might be also under consideration. But as far as the area that is on the south side of this parcel that's being looked at, I'm really disturbed by the density of the zoning, and think that's not consistent with things that we've done with other developments in the cities. Still would like to see some sort of a footprint on some of these lots to see actually how it would be sitting. Now that we know that the townhomes are not going to be part of an association and are going to be by attached duplexes or whatever, but under individual maintenance, that also calls into question the rear yard setbacks and any swales and things of that nature, because not only are you getting into decks, but you're probably getting into lawn sheds and things of that nature for that kind of equipment. And is there actually going to be room for it? And that's in addition to some of the backyards with swales in it that our city engineer had talked about. I might add, there was a comment indicating that by one of the citizens that feeling that Kathleen, our city engineer representative, was speaking in favor of the project. She's actually always neutral and is speaking from the standpoint of what needs done or not done. That's her job, so she kind of speaks kind of deadpan in that fashion. So just FYI.
Introduce these four people so we know who they are.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name's Kathleen Connor. I work for Snyder and Associates. Snyder and Associates as a firm is the city engineers for the city of Polk City. I personally am a planner that works on the development part of the project, but I do work very closely with the engineers in our firm, particularly as we get into the construction drawings and the platting and the stormwater detention design.
I'm Gary Mahana, city administrator.
My name is Rob Sarchett. I'm on the city council and the liaison to the planning and zoning. And if you would like to hear about more from my perspective, please stay after the vote. I have agenda item number 8, and we'll refrain to talk until then. But please stay, don't leave. Some people have already.
And I'm Becky Leonard, I'm the deputy city clerk.
Some additional items that I had was, our comprehensive plan clearly talks about connectivity between developments and the importance of that for developing neighborhoods. So the issue on 6th Street to Madison will likely be an issue at some point in time, whether with this development or another development. Just want to make sure people are hearing that, because if you have concerns, you need to continue voicing them. But we have, with 2 other developments recently, caused the developer, after their initial proposal, to go back and create new streets, tying them into neighboring development. So that's something that we consistently do. We don't want any development to be standalone on its own. We want to have, per our comprehensive plan, want to have those ties between neighborhoods. Just also given the lot size and the front yard setback reduction request, want to make sure that there's allowable parking between the garage and the sidewalks. Want to make sure that space is indeed long enough for that. And as many of our citizens expressed, I was wondering about a trail or sidewalk along North Third Street as well. And yeah, I guess that's the majority of my questions and concerns right now. I think the rest of them have been
Yeah,
addressed.
just briefly on the trail, that was my miss, that would have been, that's something we would have definitely caught. There is a trail easement along Third and on Vista Lake, for example, to the Indian Creek Technology Campus to the north. So I was reviewing this fairly quickly and did not mention that.
Okay.
That would, for the comprehensive plan, it should be trail easement.
And I guess also lastly, and just kind of following up on something that Commissioner Sires said, was I don't remember the last time we approved anything that had a list this long of open items. That's just something that we are accustomed to. So, any other questions or comments?
I guess I'd make a few, a lot of them have already been mentioned, but the connectivity, I think, with the roads are a big thing that we've tried to work towards. I think the density here is probably a lot denser than what we would like to see. And when I read through the zoning regulations on PUD, I guess there's 4 items in there, you know, it says you should meet one or more of the following criteria. And I guess I have a hard time seeing how this fits into one or more of those criteria, I guess, from what we're looking at, so. That's where I think it's-
I'd like to say thank you for all your comments. I think we on the council have all heard you. And I know I have concerns and along with your concerns, and I don't feel that we have enough information yet.
I too would be in favor of some more information. I know that from this kind of density development, my first impression was there would have to be another outlet. Traffic-wise would be a huge issue for me, dumping all that on the Third Street. I just don't see how that would work so well. The zoning we currently have, you know, was put in place for a reason, and I do like it. I guess at this point, if we change it, I think we potentially making a precedent of putting high-density housing in our community, and I personally I'm not really strongly in favor of that. I am open to looking at more information, I guess, and more on the type of homes you're planning. There was a question about basements. I assume they have basements, that type of thing. But with the traffic, the density, many of the issues that were raised, I would echo those. I also see in PUD there was a requirement for a 35-foot setback from adjacent zoning instead of 30-foot. So that would be something I think at minimum we'd want. I think the screening of trees is probably not enough if it was to move forward. So there's some issues like that I just think would need to be addressed before I'd be real confident in moving forward with it.
Sure. I hear you and appreciate everyone being here. I concur with my fellow folks here at the table. My other concern is and I think we've addressed this before, when we have a rezoning issue, is when we have a large land owner and it takes up more than or meets that 50%, I would like for us to see that the folks, the residential people actually have to sign it too, or at least a higher percentage for them. Because it's really easy to get a large landowner and signs off on it, meets your 50%, and then you have folks around the table that didn't get the memo or didn't have the opportunity to have a conversation with the developers and maybe find out more before it gets to this stage. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Just a follow-up question, is that city ordinance or is that state law? State ordinance? Or city ordinance? I guess I'd like to go back to the petitioner as far as how you would like us to proceed at this time. Do you want to go back and take a look at it, decide how you want to move forward, or would you like us to proceed with an up or down vote?
I think we'd like to table the development point in time.
There's a few other comments I'd like to make. One of them is, the door frame development originally, I believe that Mel was tied to making larger lots due to the inability to tie on the sanitary sewer. So these lots have to be larger in order to have a lateral system in them. Now I understand you do have a sanitary sewer, but that's why your lots are so big. I think if Mel had the ability to have sanitary sewer, that your lots would have been probably 125 feet by 80 feet wide. I'm just speculating, but that's kind of why your lots are so big. So another reason is, another item I'd like to say is that Polk City isn't going to be a small sleepy town anymore. It's going to develop like Aiken. It's just that this is the largest metropolitan area in Iowa. Things are going to develop. And Polk City just doesn't have its own school district. It's North Polk. I don't know if anyone knows what the school district boundaries are, but the boundaries go clear over to Elkhart. And the south boundary is basically 118th Street, I believe. And there's currently development going on north of 118th Street north of Aiken. So the schools are going to have to, there's going to have to be more provision of schools. And it's not just because of Polk City growing, it's because of Aiken growing. So we're just a little part of the school district that's creating more schools to be built, not just this development. Thank you.
Okay, so item 7 on the agenda is tabled at the request of the applicant. Do we need to take any further action on that?
Due to the amount of comments that we received, when this comes up again, we'll notify people within 250 feet, like we did with this one. Please watch our website, and we will get out information as we did on this. I don't know when that's going to be, so I can't say come next month, so we'll have to make a notification.
Okay. So in essence, the applicants, for lack of a better word, regrouping, going to be taking another look at the development and whether or not they want to proceed, and if they do proceed, how they'd like to adjust. Is that it?
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay, so that takes care of item 7 on the agenda. We have 4 additional items on the agenda. We can hold off for 2 minutes if some folks would like to leave, or if you'd like to stay for these quick items, that would be great. Okay, I take that back. Rod wants you to stay.
I just want to, thank you guys, I just want to be very clear and hopefully redundant about the process here. What you've seen, but let me back up. So landowners have the right to petition their government, and that's what you've seen here. And that's a proposed development that came from a private entity. There has been no approval or sign off in a series of required approvals and sign-offs for this to come to fruition. So whether you're frustrated or happy or anything in between, I would just remind you to direct that appropriately where it's coming from. Nothing has been decided. I'm probably taking a little bit of liberty with what I'm supposed to be doing with my council liaison report here today, but I think it's warranted. And just what, so my opinion is neither the time nor the place right now. If I recognize some faces, I don't recognize some others. I'd love to talk to all of you about this if you're so willing, and my contact information is on the website. But I do gotta say, to your final comment, you're in no position to tell us how to develop. That's not your decision to make. You said we're gonna develop like Aiken.
I didn't say that.
You did say that.
You did say that.
That's exactly what you said.
I apologize for what I said. That was not my intention whatsoever.
You said basically we're gonna become Aiken. That's what we don't want.
Well, he's not making any decisions about what gets approved. And if something does get approved, then you can hold me and my peers accountable and judge us accordingly. But I'm not gonna let anybody bully us around, because we're not gonna be a sleepy town or whatever you refer to it as. I've lived here for 18 years and I've loved every year of it, and that's not gonna change on my watch.
So, oddly, item 8 on the agenda is the council. So we'd like to add anything else? Thank you to everybody for coming. Representing yourselves.
We're on camera. Oh, no. Did I comb my hair right?
I know, I did too. Yeah, right.
It's been a busy fabulous meeting. Like to continue with the staff report, please.
I think you'll be seeing a resurgence of Big Creek Valley.
And refresh our memory.
Big Creek Valley is TTI 6.
Okay.
There's been some movement on that.
Okay, great.
That will be moving forward. Very much.
Is that the part?
That's inside TCI.
From.
Yeah.
It's kind of kidney being shaped parcels in the golf course.
Well, what needs to be done by us? Is that what we're
Well,
saying?
you only have 18 months to start your construction drawings and that kind of thing. After the preliminary plat has been approved by council. The preliminary plat has been approved by council, but 18 months has gone over. They're coming back, there's a few tweaks to it. I saw it today, they're not much, there's 5 extra lots over and above what they had the last time. And I think that's it that I should.
Okay. Anything else? Commission report? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.